Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a stretch of coastline, known for its laid-back charm. Maybe fishing boats bobbing and farms dotting the landscape. Now picture that same place, undergoing a really rapid transformation, driven by new connections and, well, changing ways of living and investing. That pivot, that fundamental shift, is the story we're diving into today.
It's a fascinating case study, isn't it? You have a region with these deep traditional roots suddenly being reshaped by external forces, major infrastructure projects, and just evolving consumer desires.
And the place we're focusing on is Sindhudurg, down the Konkan coast in Maharashtra. We've got this stack of material here, articles, research papers, internal notes, all pointing to a significant change happening in the real estate market specifically.
Right. So our mission in this deep dive is to cut through all this information. We want to figure out the core reasons why this transformation is happening now, what the current property landscape actually looks like on the ground.
Yeah, what's really going on?
Exactly. And then weigh up the potential opportunities against the, very real risks for anyone looking at real estate in Sindhudurg.
So where does this transformation begin? The sources seem to suggest it starts with a conscious effort to move beyond the historical anchors of the local economy. Agriculture, fisheries, mining. What kind of shifts are we seeing there?
Well, what's really notable is the drive towards diversifying the economic base. It's not just like incremental growth, it seems quite strategic.
Yeah.
The sources mention initiatives like the proposed Adali Pharma Hub, specifically targeting non-polluting industries. That's a clear nod to the region's environmental sensitivity, sure, but also a way to introduce different types of local jobs.
Makes sense.
There's also an MSME technology center supporting sectors like engineering and food processing, and the One District One product focus on processed cashew, kind of leveraging local strength in new ways. It's about building a more resilient, varied economy.
And sort of intertwined with that is tourism, which the sources paint as a major catalyst. Sindhudurg was declared a tourism district way back in '97, but it feels like things are in a new gear lately.
Absolutely. And tourism's impact on real estate is pretty direct. You have this incredible natural and historical canvas, those pristine beaches, the iconic Sindhudurg and Vijaydurg forts, the potential for adventure sports.
Right.
The sources show the government isn't just acknowledging this, they're actively pouring energy and policy into it. They cite the Maharashtra Tourism Policy 2024 and Swadesh Darshan 2.0. They're even planning concrete, high-profile projects like the INS Guldar Artificial Reef and Underwater Museum.
Oh, interesting.
And a submersible vessel project. This level of planned investment, well, it attracts private capital, and that capital needs physical manifestation, which often means real estate development.
And you can see the results filtering through the broader economy too, right?
Yeah.
There's mention of robust economic growth.
Yes, the district's overall economic output, measured by things like GDP and NDDP, basically the total value of goods and services produced there has been on a consistent upward trend. The sources specifically highlighted a strong period of growth between 2020-21 and 2021-22. That kind of fundamental economic health, it underpins confidence for investment, including in property.
Okay, so economic diversification and a booming government-backed tourism push are laying the groundwork. But if we look at the sources, there's one factor that comes up again and again as the most impactful catalyst for real estate specifically, and that's infrastructure.
Ah, yes. This is where the story of transformation really accelerates. Access changes everything. The sources emphasize that improving how people and goods get to and around Sindhudurg is fundamentally reshaping its investment appeal and property values.
And leading that charge seems to be airport development. There's the local Sindhudurg Airport at Chipi, operational since late 2021.
Right. Chipi improved domestic flight options, gave a direct boost to local tourism and business travel. Useful, definitely. But the real game changer, as the sources describe it, is the new Manohar International Airport, MOPI, just across the border in Goa.
Right, OPA. And it's incredibly close, isn't it? Something like...
Only about 14 kilometers from Sindhudurg's Adali industrial area. It's practically next door.
14 kilometers. That proximity is key.
Yeah.
Did the sources quantify the impact of MOPI opening?
They did, and it's significant. The operationalization of MOPI is directly linked in the sources to a substantial property price jump of 25–40% in the nearby areas of Sindhudurg.
Wow, just like that.
Pretty much. It immediately put the district on the map for a different class of buyer and positioned it as a more viable, accessible second home market. It's leveraging MOPI's connectivity and, anticipating spillover effects from the commercial development planned around MOPI, like the Eurocity and resort projects.
Wow, a 25 to 40% jump just from an airport opening nearby. That really underscores how dramatically infrastructure can revalue a location, changing perceptions of distance and convenience.
It connects Sindhudurg to major metros and international points in a way it simply wasn't before. Opens up whole new possibilities for residency and investment.
And it's not just the air. Road connectivity is also getting a massive upgrade with the Konkan Expressway, the Mumbai-Goa Coastal Highway.
Yeah, this is projected to be largely completed by June 2025, and it's another game changer for road travel. It'll slash the driving time between Mumbai and Goa significantly, maybe down to 6 to 8 hours.
Huge difference.
But more importantly for Sindhudurg, this 6-lane highway isn't just a bypass. It acts as a major development corridor, traversing right through the district and connecting towns and villages along its path.
So we're not just talking about getting past Sindhudurg faster, but opening up areas within it.
Precisely. The sources anticipate significant land value appreciation along this corridor, especially near the planned interchanges. They highlight places like Kankavli, Kudal, and Sawantwadi. Plus, the upgrade of the existing NH66 also improves north-south access further.
Then you have the coastal angle itself. Port development is mentioned as part of this multimodal picture.
Yes, the expansion happening at Reddy Port and the development of the new greenfield Vijaydurg port signal an increased focus on maritime trade potential. And for tourism and local transport, there's a planned roll-on, roll-off, or ro-ro ferry service connecting Mumbai directly to Malvan.
A ro-ro ferry, okay.
Yeah, adding yet another layer of accessibility for people and vehicles.
So air, major highways, improved ports, even a ferry. It's a full-scale connectivity revolution for the district.
Which, as we discussed, is the primary force the sources identify as driving the revaluation of real estate here. It just makes the idea of owning property, living, or even working here much more feasible for people based elsewhere.
Let's look at the real estate market itself then. The sources describe it as seeing significant price appreciation, which we saw with that MOP impact, but also as being quite fragmented. What does that fragmentation mean in practice for someone looking to buy?
It basically means that while the headlines might talk about big percentage jumps, that impact isn't felt uniformly across the entire district. Prices can vary significantly, not just between different slukas, but even within, tiny micro markets.
Okay.
This suggests that while the big infrastructure drivers are crucial, local factors, proximity to specific beaches, unique natural features, existing development hubs, or even, importantly, environmental zoning are creating very different market dynamics from one area to the next. A buyer really needs to understand these localized influences.
Is the market purely driven by capital appreciation expectations, or is there a rental component, people actually using these places?
Oh, yeah. The rental market is actually quite strong, described as on an upswing. The sources noted an attractive average rental yield of around 7.2%.
7.2%. That's pretty good.
It is, and it's obviously fueled by the growing tourism sector, but also increasingly by the workation trend, people using these coastal properties as remote work bases for extended periods.
Right, the whole work from anywhere thing.
Yeah.
So it offers income potential alongside the appreciation. What kind of properties are most in demand according to the sources?
The highest demand seems to be for land parcels, which is kind of typical in a developing area where buyers want to build or maybe just hold for appreciation.
Makes sense. Build your own dream place.
Exactly. But there's also strong interest in low-rise properties and villa units. We're also seeing the emergence of larger integrated townships. These are, gated communities offering villas, farmhouses, service departments, providing that bundled lifestyle experience.
And what specifically are buyers looking for in these properties or locations? Is it just a nice house?
Well, beyond standard modern amenities, the sources really emphasize a desire for a resort-style living experience. Buyers want proximity to key attractions. The beaches are a given, obviously, but also the airports and the emerging leisure hubs. It's less about just a house and more about access to a certain lifestyle and surroundings.
Got it. Who are these buyers then? Is it one single type of person?
No, it's a pretty diverse mix, actually, which makes the market dynamics interesting. You have non-resident Indians, NRIs, often motivated by investment returns, seeking stability, maybe planning for future retirement.
Okay.
Then there are urban investors from places like Mumbai and Pune looking for second homes, weekend getaways, or simply alternatives to more saturated, expensive markets.
That classic second home demographic.
Exactly. And that group includes lifestyle buyers seeking a personal retreat and others taking advantage of flexible work arrangements for longer longer stays. You also have retirees drawn by the tranquility and perceived lower cost of living. Holiday home seekers are often looking for a blend of personal use and that rental income potential we just talked about. And then, driven by the economic development itself, you might have the local population looking for upgraded housing, plus developers and pure investors focused on capital appreciation, rental yields, and exploring niche concepts like ecotourism resorts or wellness centers.
Wow, that range of buyer motivations really speaks to the multifaceted appeal of the region. With all this activity, are there specific areas within Sindhudurg that the sources highlight as particularly promising investment hotspots? Where's the action concentrated?
Yes, the sources pinpoint a few key zones. The Umpe Airport influence zone is front and center, especially areas like Dodamarg and Swantwadi, due to their direct proximity. That makes sense.
Yeah, proximity pays.
Then the Konkan Expressway corridor is another, focusing on towns and villages benefiting from those planned interchanges. Kankavli, Kudal, and Swantwadi again showing up as key nodes.
So infrastructure proximity is a clear predictor of these hotspots.
It absolutely is. But the established tourism appeal also creates hotspots along the coastal tourism belt. Areas like Malvan, Vengurla, and Devgad are still maintaining their draw. And the areas linked to the planned industrial growth, like Adali village in Kudal, are also identified as emerging zones to watch.
Okay. For someone monitoring this market, beyond just property prices, what are the crucial indicators the sources suggest keeping an eye on? What should you track?
Good question. I mean, besides the specific property data like listings versus sales velocity, localized price trends, rental yields, the usual stuff,
Right.
you really need to track the progress of those big infrastructure projects. Are they hitting their completion targets? That's critical. Monitor tourism metrics like footfall, look at job creation from the new industrial initiatives, and watch broader economic health indicators like GDP and per capita income for the district.
So the fundamentals.
Exactly. And the sources also mentioned tracking adherence to regulatory processes and even watching changes in local income levels as relevant indicators of sustainability.
You mentioned regulations. The sources really emphasize Sindhudurg's sensitive ecology and the environmental regulations that come with it. How does that impact real estate development? That seems like a big factor.
It's a huge factor, and the sources make it clear it's non-negotiable. The region's natural beauty is a core part of its appeal, right? But it also means development isn't a free-for-all. Strict environmental regulations are a significant consideration for any project.
What are the main environmental rules developers or buyers need to be aware of from these sources? Like what specifically?
Okay, the most prominent are the Coastal Regulation Zone, or CRZ, norms along the extensive coastline. These have very specific rules about construction setbacks, height, density near the sea, all that.
Right. Standard coastal stuff, but probably quite strict here.
Likely, yes, although the sources did note an interesting recent change empowering local authorities for clearance of smaller residential constructions within CRZ areas.
Ooh, that seems like a notable nuance. Does that indicate a shift, perhaps making it a bit easier for locals or smaller projects while keeping a tight rein on larger ones?
That seems to be the implication the sources suggest. It could be aimed at streamlining approvals for local housing or maybe smaller scale tourism units, while larger commercial developments likely still face more rigorous central review processes to protect that sensitive coastal ecosystem.
Okay, that makes sense. What else besides CRZ?
Then parts of the district fall within the eco-sensitive area, ESA designation, linked to the Western Ghats. This designation regulates or even prohibits certain activities entirely, like new mining or large-scale construction that could impact the biodiversity.
The Western Ghats designation. Right.
You see this reflected in the types of industries being encouraged. That Adali Pharma Hub, focusing on non-polluting activities, is a direct consequence of these ecological considerations.
And for any larger project, there's the Standard Environmental Impact Assessment, the EIA.
Right. EIA is mandatory for significant projects, and the sources point out this definitely adds complexity and can extend timelines and costs. Navigating these layers of regulation requires expertise and, frankly, patience.
So these regulations can be seen as hurdles, adding complexity and time. But do the sources also suggest a potential positive outcome from them? Is there an upside?
Absolutely. I mean, while they add complexity, they are also fundamentally pushing for sustainable and eco-conscious development. For buyers seeking that resort-style living or a getaway rooted in nature, preserving the environment is actually key to the appeal.
True. You don't want to spoil what you came for.
Exactly. By ensuring development respects the ecology, these regulations can actually enhance the long-term value and desirability of properties. It sort of aligns growth with the very natural assets that make Sindhudurg attractive in the first place.
It really sounds like due diligence here isn't just about the bricks and mortar or the land title, but also critically about the environmental status of the land and the ability to get the necessary clearances.
It's paramount. The sources strongly recommend rigorous due diligence on land titles, confirming CRZ and ESA status, verifying all required environmental clearances before any investment or development proceeds. It's a critical step that can absolutely make or break a project.
So pulling all these threads together, the economic shifts, the transformative infrastructure, the market dynamics, the diverse buyers, and this crucial environmental context. What's the overall outlook for Sindhudurg real estate, according to the materials you reviewed? What's the bottom line?
Well, the outlook is generally characterized as promising, even having explosive growth potential, particularly supported by those attractive rental yields we discussed earlier.
Explosive growth is an exciting phrase, but it often comes with potential downsides or risks. What risks are identified in the sources? What should people be wary of?
Yeah, several key risks are definitely flagged. First, market volatility. That rapid price appreciation, especially near Olympia, could potentially have a speculative component. If the underlying economic growth or the delivery of promised infrastructure doesn't fully materialize or gets delayed, there's a risk of a market correction.
So that sharp rise isn't necessarily a guaranteed trajectory upwards forever. Need the fundamentals to keep pace.
No market is without its cycles, right? The sources also point to potential infrastructure bottlenecks that persist. While major projects are underway, challenges like, say, water scarcity during summer months and the need for robust local utility infrastructure to support all the new development remain concerns.
You need the supporting services for growth to be sustainable. Water, power, sewage.
Exactly. Regulatory hurdles also continue to pose a risk. The complexity of environmental rules can cause significant project delays or genuinely limit the amount of land available for certain types of development. And as a coastal district, climate change impacts are a real long-term concern. Vulnerability to things like sea level rise and maybe increased frequency of extreme weather events.
A crucial consideration for long-term investment in the area, for sure.
Absolutely. There's also execution risk. The success of these large infrastructure, tourism, and industrial projects is dependent on their timely and effective implementation. Delays can dampen market sentiment and push back those anticipated benefits.
Right.
Social and community acceptance is another factor mentioned. Large-scale development needs to be handled inclusively, ensuring it benefits, rather than negatively impacts local populations. Friction there can cause problems.
And finally, the reliance on tourism. That has its own risks.
Yes, over-reliance on tourism brings the inherent risks of seasonality, the boom and bust cycles and vulnerability to broader economic downturns that affect discretionary spending and travel. If tourism takes a hit, the market could feel it.
That paints a picture of a region with undeniable potential, but also significant factors that require careful navigation and really solid long-term planning.
Sindhudurg is definitely at a pivotal point. The confluence of dramatically improved connectivity, a clear governmental push for tourism and targeted industry, and evolving buyer preferences for second homes and flexible living creates substantial opportunities. This seems particularly true in the segments focusing on second homes, luxury villas, and properties tied directly into the tourism ecosystem.
And realizing that potential isn't just about attracting investment, it's about how that investment is managed on the ground.
That's really the core message from the sources. Achieving sustainable, long-term prosperity requires meticulous planning, strict adherence to those vital environmental regulations we discussed, continued investment in supporting utility infrastructure, and a nuanced understanding of the distinct micro-markets and their specific drivers within the district. It's not one size fits all.
It really boils down to finding that critical balance, then, between growth and preservation.
It does. The sources strongly indicate that the paramount importance of balancing this new wave of growth with the preservation of Sindhudurg's unique ecological character is what will ultimately determine the sustained prosperity of its real estate market in the long run.
So as you consider this evolving landscape, here's something to ponder. In a place like Sindhudurg, where preserving a sensitive natural environment is so essential for its long-term appeal, how might the very concept of luxury living itself need to redefine itself to be truly sustainable and desirable? What does luxury even mean there?